You're doing your thing. Just tell me what happened that day.
It was a 1907 white steam car. So the fuel line was clogged. So I was underneath it trying to clog, and I said, blow some air through the line. Let's see if we can clear the line. And then poof, and suddenly, boom, I got a face full of gas. And then the pilot light jumped and my face caught on fire.
You know, folks, the price of gas skyrocketing, in this economy, terrible shape. People trying to save as much money as they can. So if you're like me, you want to do your shopping at the 99-cent store.
Do you drive any of these cars?
No, every car here is on the road. Every car here is licensed, and you can hop in and go for a ride in any one of them.
The Mechanic's Garage has always felt like home to Jay Leno. Not the stage, not the cameras, not the suits or applause. The garage. The sound of a wrench clicking into place could calm him more than laughter from an audience of millions. But on a quiet afternoon in late 2022, the sanctuary that brought peace to Jay Leno nearly took everything away. He was working on one of his prized historical machines, a 1900s-era steam-powered car, a relic from the dawn of American motor history. For most people, the idea of maintaining such a vehicle would sound absurdly dangerous. For Jay, it was a normal Tuesday. Witnesses say he was doing what he always does. Sleeves rolled, head under the hood, troubleshooting a clog in the fuel line. Steam cars demand respect. One slip, one miscalculation, and the results are unforgiving. Jay called out instructions casually, unaware that the next 2 seconds would become a defining shadow over the rest of his life. A burst of gasoline sprayed across his face. A spark jumped, perhaps from a nearby pilot light, perhaps from static, perhaps simply bad luck, and a wall of flame engulfed his head. When Jay stumbled back, grabbing at his face, those nearby saw skin peeling, hair burning, and his eyes barely open. He was rushed to medical care immediately, suffering third-degree burns. The man known for jokes, denim, and a seemingly unshakable calm was suddenly a patient wrapped in bandages, treated for pain, and warned of the psychological toll that such trauma carries. Publicly, Jay insisted he was fine. He made jokes within days. He returned to work faster than most doctors would have advised. But those closer to him whispered something else. It wasn't the first fire in his life, just the first one people could see. To understand what that moment truly meant for Jay Leno, we must go back to the beginning, to a childhood less glamorous than the headlines that would one day carry his name. Jay Leno was not born into fame, wealth, or the comforts associated with celebrity. He entered the world on April 28, 1950, in New Rochelle, New York, a peaceful town sitting just outside the restless heartbeat of Manhattan. His mother, Catherine, had arrived in America at the age of 11. She never finished high school, but she understood resilience more than any classroom could teach. She worked hard, spoke directly, and believed deeply in doing what needed to be done, even when no applause followed. His father, Angelo, immigrated from a small village in southern Italy, a place where opportunity was rare, but family was everything. Angelo sold insurance. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't make headlines, but it provided stability, and stability was the greatest luxury the Leno household could afford. They weren't poor, but money had a job, and that job wasn't entertainment. It was survival. The Leno home carried 2 accents, 2 immigrant histories, and 1 shared philosophy. If you want something, you work for it. Jay absorbed it quietly, watching his parents navigate challenges with grit rather than complaint. He later joked in interviews about being the kid who never needed much attention. But those early years carved something important into him. A belief that being tired doesn't mean stop. A belief that obstacles are work, not walls. It's the kind of thinking that builds icons and breaks them. At the age of 7, the Leno family relocated to Andover, Massachusetts. New Rochelle had offered peace, but Andover offered a tougher set of rules, especially at St. John's Preparatory School, a strict Catholic institution where mistakes had consequences and silence was the expectation. Jay did not fit easily into quiet. He wasn't the rebellious child throwing punches or skipping class. His rebellion was born from curiosity and a relentless desire to make people laugh. Some children draw, some collect things, some play sports. Jay studied reactions. He could deliver a quick comment that sent a room into hysterics before he even understood why it worked. Teachers often didn't laugh, but students always did. One prank stands out, the day he set off firecrackers inside the classroom. It was loud, chaotic, and nearly earned him immediate expulsion. The principal was furious. Teachers were shocked. But Jay, he noticed something most kids would have missed. They were angry, but they were listening. One teacher, exhausted by his antics, wrote on his report card, "If Jay spent as much effort studying as he does entertaining, he could be something great one day." She meant it as criticism. It read like destiny. Those school years didn't polish his behavior, but they sharpened what would one day be his most valuable tool: timing. He learned how to hold a room, how to pause, how to deliver a line at the exact second it mattered most. Comedy is rhythm, and Jay developed rhythm long before he stepped on a stage. Yet while Jay played the role of the class comedian, his home carried a quieter story. In the Leno household, laughter didn't erase responsibility. Jay's older brother, Patrick, was reserved, serious, thoughtful, nearly the opposite of Jay in tone and temperament. Patrick looked at the world with caution. Jay looked at it with curiosity. Patrick planned. Jay reacted. But the difference didn't divide them. If anything, it defined the roles they would carry later in life. Jay learned early how to help, how to stay steady when others needed someone to be predictable. It may not have been glamorous, but it made him dependable, something the entertainment industry desperately needs and rarely finds. People often forget that the celebrity we see is shaped years before we ever hear their name. For Jay, those early lessons of work ethic, resilience, and humor weren't accidental. They were survival. But survival has a cost. By the time Jay Leno reached adulthood, comedy wasn't a hobby anymore. It was the compass. He performed wherever he could. Small clubs, basements, campuses, tiny lounges, where the crowd could fit in a single photograph. He wasn't the overnight success the headlines would later imply. He didn't explode onto the scene. He climbed, quietly, one step at a time. He drove across states, slept in cars, walked into venues that didn't know his name, and walked out of some that wished they still didn't. Comedy is brutal. It rejects far more than it rewards. But Jay didn't stop. His upbringing had taught him that lack of immediate success wasn't failure. It was part of the work. That discipline eventually paid off. He found a rhythm in the industry, earned respect, and built a reputation as a hard worker who treated comedy like a craft rather than a performance. His charm wasn't the forced smile of a TV personality. It was the grounded humor of someone who had seen enough life to laugh at it. But every rise casts a shadow. The greater the success, the more silent the sacrifices become. Jay Leno and Mavis met in the 1970s, a time of major cultural shifts, political tension, and changing expectations between men and women. Their relationship didn't follow the standard Hollywood script. There were no scandals, no tabloid explosions, no circus. From the outside, it looked simple, maybe even old-fashioned. But the decision not to have children, a topic often whispered about in interviews, articles, also known as not to have children. Jay Leno and Mavis met in the 1970s, a time of major cultural shifts, political tension, and changing expectations between men and women. Their relationship didn't follow the standard Hollywood script. There were no scandals, no tabloid explosions, no circus. From the outside, it looked simple, maybe even old-fashioned, but the decision not to have children, a topic often whispered about in interviews, articles, maybe even old-fashioned. And casual speculation was more than a lifestyle choice. It was a boundary, a protective wall around a marriage that stayed far more private than the entertainment world was used to seeing. To the public, it remained a mystery. To Jay and Mavis, it was an agreement built on unspoken understanding, mutual respect, and perhaps private pain that never made headlines. When the garage fire happened in 2022, many fans saw a man injured. Those closest to him saw something deeper, a reminder that time catches everyone, even those who refuse to slow down. After the fire, most people expected Jay to step back, to allow himself recovery, to accept vulnerability, to rest. He did none of those things. Within days, he was back performing shows. He walked on stage with visible burns, bandages beneath his shirt collar, and the faint scent of hospital treatment still on his skin. The audience laughed. He delivered punchlines like nothing happened. But this time, laughter wasn't hiding the pain. It was carrying it. Jay Leno has long been admired for his discipline, his consistency, his nearly obsessive love for cars, work, and performance. But those same traits carry danger. What happens when work becomes identity? What happens when the stage becomes the only place where someone feels alive? What happens when pain is easier to ignore than acknowledge? For decades, Jay climbed, past criticism, past competition, past expectation, until he became the face of late-night television, a household name, a brand built on dependable humor. But the higher you climb, the harder the fall becomes, even when the fall doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes, it comes in small pieces: a garage fire, a hidden struggle, a private sacrifice. And sometimes, those pieces build a story far heavier than any camera captures. When Jay Leno first stepped onto the Tonight Show stage, few could predict how long he would stay, or how complicated his departure would become. For years, he wasn't just a host, he was a cultural ritual. Viewers ended their day with his voice, his monologues, his safe and steady sense of humor that became part of the American evening. But television is a shifting landscape, driven not by loyalty but by novelty. As digital media rose, late-night programming faced a new adversary: the internet. Fast, unpredictable, and viral. Clips could be shared within seconds. Comedy no longer required a couch or a channel. It lived in pockets, scrolled between meetings, watched silently with captions instead of laughter. Jay represented tradition, television, stability. The industry wanted evolution. By the time he stepped away for the second time, after a highly publicized handoff and return, it was clear: the era of Jay Leno was closing. Not because he had failed, but because the audience he entertained for decades now consumed entertainment differently. Viewers moved on. Networks moved on. The world moved, even when Jay wasn't ready to. Leaving The Tonight Show wasn't just retirement. For Jay, who built his identity on showing up every night without fail, the goodbye carried more weight than headlines acknowledged. It represented a forced separation between a man and the rhythm that kept him alive. And without that rhythm, silence grew. To the public, Jay Leno looked unstoppable. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't spiral into scandal like many celebrities who survived fame but lost themselves. His escape was the garage, the machines, the engines, the roar of horsepower echoing off concrete walls. Cars were predictable, people weren't. Yet as the years pushed forward, health concerns followed closely behind. First, the 2022 fire, third-degree burns, skin grafts, and hospital care that he minimized with jokes and performed through with a smile. Not long after that, another accident left him with multiple broken bones after a motorcycle crash. Two serious accidents in a short period of time shook his fan base. Was it bad luck, or was it a sign that time had caught up? Jay would never admit the latter. But documentary lenses are designed to observe What the subject refuses to say. The man who spent his entire life moving at full speed, comedically, professionally, mechanically, was now encountering obstacles not even he could outrun. Machines can be repaired. Skin can be grafted. Bones can heal. But the clock keeps ticking. For decades, Jay Leno and his wife Mavis have maintained a marriage nearly untouched by Hollywood's chaos. No scandals, no tabloid affairs, no public feuds. A rarity in the spotlight. But privacy comes with questions. Fans know they never had children. That fact alone sparked speculation, theories, assumptions, some kind, some not. Interviews over the years offered hints but never clarity. The reasons remained personal, and personal became sacred. In an industry built on exposure, Jay built walls, strong ones. Mavis, passionate about politics and social causes, carved a life away from cameras. Jay, despite spending most of his years in front of audiences, remained surprisingly private outside the studio doors. Their arrangement worked, until age forced reflection. Who takes care of a man who never stops working? Who slows him down when he refuses to hear the word rest? Who supports the person the world believes doesn't need support? The fire in 2022 tested those answers. The recovery required them. Marriage is partnership, but partnerships are tested hardest when the world believes you're invincible. Jay Leno will forever be connected to two worlds: late-night television, where he reigned as one of the most consistent and successful hosts; automotive history, where his garage became a museum of engines, art, and obsession. His collection is not simply a hobby. It is the largest part of his legacy, or at least the part he allows the public to see. Vintage steam cars, rare prototypes, motorcycles that never hit production lines, each one a piece of history with its own story. Jay didn't just collect them, he preserved them. Yet with age and injury, a quiet question whispers louder each year. What happens to the garage when its guardian is gone? Museums require funding, organization, caretakers. Collections need successors. Estates need decisions. Jay has never been a man focused on endings, only projects. But projects, unlike people, don't age. Fans assume his legacy is secure, but behind the scenes are roots planted in childhood. Money matters, nothing is guaranteed, and planning for tomorrow is work, not conversation. The garage is beautiful, but beauty requires care long after applause fades. There are entertainers who thrive on fame. Then there are entertainers who thrive on work. Jay Leno belongs to the second group. He never wanted to be the most controversial. He never needed to be the trendsetter. He didn't chase viral moments or shock value. His goal was simpler. Show up, do the job, be dependable. But dependability can become a mask. When someone's identity is built entirely on consistency, stopping feels like disappearing. That's why, after life-threatening injuries, Jay went back on stage. That's why, after broken bones and burns, he smiled for cameras. That's why, even now, the idea of slowing terrifies him more than pain ever could. He laughs through discomfort. He jokes through trauma. It's admirable and dangerous. When the audience claps, the show continues. But when the lights shut off, the performer goes home. And when comedy is your armor, the silence becomes the battlefield. Jay Leno remains a respected figure. He isn't disgraced. He isn't forgotten. In fact, for many viewers, he represents a golden era of late-night television. Clean comedy, predictable posture, a familiar face at the end of the day. But as the world accelerates faster, Jay's trademark style feels increasingly like a relic, cherished, nostalgic, but drifting away from what new audiences seek. Entertainment demands reinvention. Jay demands reliability. That conflict is widening. His recent accidents have made fans uneasy. His relentless schedule raises eyebrows. His refusal to slow down sparks concern. The question isn't whether Jay Leno has earned admiration. He has. The question isn't whether he's resilient. He's proven that. The question isn't whether he will be remembered. He will. The question is, what does a man built from work do when work becomes a risk instead of a refuge? A fire can be extinguished. Bones can be set. But time is the only force that never negotiates. Jay Leno's story is not a tragedy, but it is a warning. A warning about passion without pause, about dedication without balance, about a life spent giving to the world without leaving room for fragility. He rose without scandal. He served without ego. He entertained without fail. But now, the pace of life challenges him the way critics never could. The garage, his sanctuary, is still filled with engines waiting for his touch. The stage still welcomes him. The world still recognizes his laugh. Yet something unspoken lingers in the air. A sense that the chapter is changing, whether he acknowledges it or not. Because even legends must wrestle with time. And even the most dependable engines eventually need to rest. Jay Leno built a life that defied setbacks, shaped comedy, preserved history, and became part of our cultural fabric. But as the future unfolds and the man who never slows continues moving forward, one truth echoes. Things aren't looking good for Jay Leno. Not because he's weak, but because time is undefeated. And now the world watches, not with laughter, but with hope. Hope that a man who gave so much to his craft finally learns to give something back to himself.